I just had so many setbacks, so many failures, so many times getting told you're not good enough. There wasn't much self-worth at all.
Too often athletes tie their whole self-worth to what they're achieving.
Detachment is one of the most important and powerful things that we can lean into.
If you believe that you can't, you won't. But if you believe that you can, you will.
When you can fall in love with your own life for no reason whatsoever, everything gets pretty good.
Welcome to 4TG. Denny Kennedy, welcome to the 4TG podcast.
Kylie, thanks for having me in. Feels like an absolute privilege to be the first male guest.
Yeah, you go down in history. Hey?
Yeah, look out.
So for context for the listeners, I've been working with you for the past, about 3 or 4 months.
Yep.
And I have seen exponential shifts just in my life alone, just from sort of addressing what my self-limiting beliefs are and how to overcome them. So I'm extremely excited to tell the listeners a little bit about your wisdom and your teachings and how that can apply to young female athletes looking to go to the next level in sport.
I appreciate it. And yeah, on that note, yeah, you have seen so much growth and progress in the last, I think it's probably around 4 or 5 months now. But as I say to everyone that I work with, like, that's you, like yourself to thank for that. I think at the end of the day, there is so much information that people can access at literally like the click of a finger. Doesn't mean that people are going to follow through. And so when you can have these, as we talk about, anchors and some structure and accountability, and you continually show up for yourself, good things happen. And I think obviously, you know, even with this podcast, this was kind of just a conversation we had and you took action on it very, very quickly. And I think that's, you know, a big part of the reason as to why I have no doubt this podcast will be incredibly successful. But even with your own journey, I'm really excited to keep, you know, following along with how you're going with everything.
Yeah. And what episode were you up to, you were just saying?
This week will be 582.
582.
So you got a bit of catching up to do.
I've got a lot of legwork to get there. But anyway, we can only dream.
Exactly. You'll get there one day.
Absolutely. So before we get into Denny, the mindset and fitness coach, I want to get a little bit more into Denny, what your childhood was like, and I guess how sport fitted in with your childhood journey and what you sort of learnt from sport, the good, the bad and the ugly.
Yeah. I mean, I tell people all the time I learnt probably the most impactful, you'd almost say life lessons from sport, particularly throughout, you know, high school. I was always focused on playing footy and basketball, but basketball was probably more the priority. And, you know, eventually left home straight after year 12, moved to Melbourne for basketball full time for 2 years. Throughout that journey, in particular from say 13, 14, all the way through till about 20, 21, I just had so many setbacks, so many failures, so many times getting told you're not good enough. And we were very fortunate to grow up like with such an incredible group of athletes in Horsham. It's actually wild, like how many good footballers and basketballers that have come from Horsham. So from a basketball perspective, I was super fortunate because I was surrounded by these great players. But what come with that was, again, just consistently being told, essentially, you're not good enough. And having these failures while basically every single other person around me was achieving the success that I wanted to. And so what I learned really on is that realistically the only thing that was within my control was the amount of work I put in. And so I really valued hard work very quickly. And I truly believed, and still do, that, you know, no one was working harder than me. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, I just had this level of, I guess you could say, resilience, or just no fear of failure or rejection because I had experienced it so many times. I basically become like desensitized to that. And I think that has been such an important factor as to why other elements of my life have gone the way they have, because of, you know, no hesitation to just go all in with it. And I think what I found towards the back end of my basketball career is I was obsessed with health and fitness. And so you asked like what lessons come from this. When I finally stopped basketball and went into business and I did physique competing for a while, that was like the first time where there was a direct correlation between what I put in and what I got out. You know, as you understand, like in a team sport, you can be the hardest worker. You can be more committed than everyone there, but it still doesn't give you a guarantee that you're going to achieve the success that you want, right? Ultimately. And so I just think, the amount of times I had these setbacks, which to be honest at the time were like devastating. My whole life was basketball. And knowing what I know now, I'd place like my whole identity around being a basketballer and ideally doing well in basketball. And so, you know, when I was having these setbacks or missing teams or this, that, and the other, it wasn't just the basketball element that was frustrating or challenging. It was the fact that I I was tying my self-worth to that. And so there wasn't much self-worth at all, to be honest. Like that whole period, I've probably said it to you in our coaching calls, like that whole period for me was challenging. And a lot of it now that I understand what I do, a lot of it's probably self-inflicted. But yeah, I like hated high school pretty much because I was so much of a people pleaser, you know, consistently kind of wanting that validation, not even necessarily from others. I think it was the validation I felt I needed to actually have any self-worth. So I know this answer's gone way longer than what you expected and I've completely gone off track. But yeah, it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot, which I've been able to translate into business and into the podcast and just everything. So it's always easy to look back in hindsight, but I'm so grateful for how shit of a period that was, to be honest, because it definitely set me up for who I am today. And without it, you know, I don't think I would have done some of the things that I've done. And I probably wouldn't be in the position that I'm in if I hadn't have had those challenging periods.
And something you said there resonates with me, and I've spoken about it on a past episode, is that too often athletes tie their whole self-worth to what they're achieving. So for me, I remember when I got my first medal, like the feeling that I felt, but then I became addicted with that I had to be getting the medals, the highest results in all facets of life. And that perfectionism really almost became crippling and was what prevented me from probably achieving some of the things that I could have, because I was just too attached to that emotion that I got from that.
Well, I mean, you and I talk about this a lot in our calls. Detachment is one of the most important and powerful things that we can lean into, you know, which sounds a bit conflicting, you know, because particularly for athletes, and we've discussed this, it can be challenging for athletes sometimes, particularly to incorporate some of this mindset and personal growth stuff, because you essentially get taught for so long, like if you want something, go out and make it happen, you know, go and train harder than anyone else, go and do this, that, the other to get to where you want to be. And there's obviously so much merit in hard work and you know, consistency, but at the same time, you also have to allow, you know, and we talk about detachment and the power of not necessarily needing something to feel the way that you want to feel. And unfortunately, a lot of people do that, you know, place their self-worth or their happiness or confidence on some future event that's coming. And so we're essentially saying we're not going to feel the way we want until we get there. And so that can be dangerous, right? Because one, you're essentially saying you're in lack, that you can't feel the way that you want, which is just not true. I think with it as well, I guess you could say, and you know, you mentioned the whole identity thing. You know, you could be the best player in the world, right? Think of LeBron James. One of the best. I'm sure we're going to get people saying he's not the GOAT. LeBron James, he is a human that's very fucking good at basketball. You know, basketballer is not who he is. And I think the faster that athletes or anyone in general can really understand this, the more enjoyable of a time that you're going to have. You know, even with a number of the AFL guys I work with now, we spend a lot of our time on being able to detach from a lot of that stuff. You know, and being able to, yes, obviously do all the work you need to do and show it for yourself, but more importantly is to enjoy it and to get out of your own head and to start to move through some of the limiting beliefs, because there are many athletes, and I'm sure there'll be people listening now, who struggle with the mental side of things when it comes to performing like on a big stage or you know, like an important game, whatever it may be. And this doesn't just have to mean sport, you know, it could be absolutely anything. So again, I feel like I've just kind of lost track of the question there, but no, hopefully that answered some of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just touching on that too about the identity is that your sporting career is inevitably going to come to an end. So once that ends, if you don't have another identity outside of sport, you're going to feel very lost.
Yeah, you see this a lot. I've been fortunate with the number of the athletes that I've worked with over the years. Like, that's something that we talk about a lot. As in, you know, my very good friend Dice Heppel, we were working together, still are, like on his mindset and personal growth a number of years now. And I think coming into, you know, the back end of his career, essentially with football, what we wanted was for him to be able to play that last game and be just as excited, if not more excited, for what's next. Not to kind of walk away from the game, which unfortunately happens to a lot of people, with no identity, with no self-worth, or, you know, because they tied everything to this game, which, as you said, it's temporary. And so whether we're talking about sport or anything in life, like, detachment is essential, because attachment, which sounds not necessarily like a bad thing, is essentially just fear of loss. And so if you are attached to anything, you're trying to hold on to it, which you cannot be present. You know, you're blocking the flow of how things are meant to go. Inevitably, you're kind of saying, like, okay, if I lose this, I'm less of a, you know, I'm not the person that I want to or need to be without that thing. And it's just not true.
And how have you seen this showing up for athletes particularly? Like, how is this not only affecting their sporting life, but also just their personal life?
Think about, like, if you're putting all of your importance, all of your worth on a performance in a game of football, and you might have a period of time where you're not, you know, reaching the level that you want to reach to. And again, part of the reason for that is because you're putting too much pressure on yourself. You're leaning into the things that you don't want to happen. You're, you know, over analyzing everything. You know, you're trying to make sure everything's perfect And so essentially you're setting yourself up for failure, right? Because it's not going to be perfect. Again, it's like when you can fall in love with your own life for no reason whatsoever, everything gets pretty fucking good. You know, and I truly mean that. Like, you're not falling in love with your life because of what you do. You're just falling in love with your life for no reason. You know, and building that self-image for yourself and just the genuine excitement for life in general. You know, one of the things I bring up in our calls is like every morning, even in my journal, I write, show me how good life can get.
Yep.
Again, that's leaning into this detachment. It's not trying to force or control anything. It's just allowing things to happen. And, you know, if there are people listening at the moment that are athletes, it's super important to make sure that you know who you are without that game, without that sport, because it is very, very challenging when you haven't done the work and you do inevitably walk away from it or your career finishes. You know, now what? You know, and that's the thing. It is temporary. It's only for a very small portion of your life that you're going to be playing professional sport if that's what you're doing. And so when you can get that excited about what's next or be just genuinely that in love with your own life for no reason whatsoever, then your experience of life is going to be pretty great.
Now, we've talked about detachment. We've talked about identity. What are some of the other practices you teach in your coaching and mindset, sort of with your clients and in your broader scheme of things now doing your
masterminds?
Masterminds, yes. Yeah. What are some of the key things that you teach your clients within those?
Yeah, look, I always say with my businesses, with my content, it's always just been kind of a reflection or an extension of myself based off what I've learned and what I've experienced, right? So with the personal development and mindset stuff, there's probably like a handful of really key areas that, you know, obviously you've worked through these with me. And so first things first is just getting clear on what we want. You know, it sounds very basic, but most people can't answer that question properly because the first thing that comes to mind is what you want, but then instantly we kind of, you know, either lean into lack and fear. We don't know how it's going to happen. We can't, you know, we don't have any evidence as to why it's going to happen. And so we kind of just let it go. I talk a lot about kind of thinking like a young kid, right? Where a young child, sorry, I should say, not a baby goat, where you think back to like when you're like, let's say 5 years old, you might be kicking the footy in the backyard and in your head, you could be on the middle of the MCG on grand final day and you've just kicked the winning goal. And that child is experiencing everything that the person who's actually doing it is experiencing. There is no difference because their brain's not then going, well, fuck, I'm like 5 and it's Tuesday and I'm in the backyard and like, how am I going to get drafted? They're not thinking about any of that. They're just living completely present in the moment with their intention or their desire and elevated emotion. So getting clarity on what you want is super important. I think one of the most important, if not the most important, is the embodiment piece and the law of vibration. And you and I have worked on this a lot and you've done such an exceptional job of it. What I mean by the law of vibration and embodiment is being able to show up in your life now as the version of yourself that is already where you want to be. Now that can sound a little confusing at the beginning, but I heard this quote once that has always stuck with me, and it's that you cannot attract anything that you don't already have. And that sounds pretty stupid when you say it out loud, but what is meant by that is until we can operate from a vibrational standpoint or a frequency standpoint of essentially being the person that we want to be already to the point where it'd just be normal for your outcome to happen, nothing will shift. Reality's always catching up to who we're being. And for majority of people, who they're being is a reaction to how shit is. And so it ends up on this loop, this cycle over and over again. And so when we talk about embodiment, again, you need to be clear on what it is that you want and think big. This is what I encourage people to do. You know, let go of the limitation, let go of it having to make sense. You don't have to know how. You should be so fucking excited about what it is that you want to do. That is the strongest emotion, not the fear of like, how's it going to work? Can I do it? Am I capable of this? What's this person going to think? This, that, the other. Like, lean into that positivity. And when you can show up as the future self, reality will catch up. Now, again, this is something that you and I have worked on a lot, which you've been doing an incredible job of. I often use the example of my coaching. When I started introducing more personal development work, I'd built a very great fitness business, but hadn't put as much, I'd never really offered anything from a personal development perspective. So when I did, I kind of had that same, you know, experience that I'd already had multiple times before of like, okay, going from basketballer to not basketballer. Going from this to that, where you really have to, again, not tie certain things to your identity, if that makes sense. And so if I'm showing up to my business at the moment, and I might be in the first 6 months of my business, I want to be showing up with every quality, with every habit, with every value that I would already have if I was where I wanted to be. And so how that looks is going to be different for everyone, right? But what we're essentially trying to do is lean into the fact that it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And when you stop looking for something, and you stop trying to force and control it and you allow it to happen, right? When you're that embodiment, the question I tell people to ask themselves is that, would it feel normal if you woke up tomorrow and all your desires were there? They just somehow fell in your lap. Would it feel normal and would it make sense? And if the answer is no, that's okay. It just means that you're not necessarily ready yet. I think that's the major thing. I know I've just mentioned a bunch of stuff, but like the intentions and the embodiment so important. The removal of or reframing of self-limiting beliefs is even more important in my opinion. But when you can live and operate from the goal, now you're not waiting for anything. You know, and that is so important, because there's a really good analogy I used the other day actually. If you're someone who is waiting for something in order to feel or to do what it is that you want to do or feel, you have to ask yourself the question, why would it happen? You know, if I'm saying I want to run a coaching business with, you know, the most elite clients possible, but then I'm showing up to a coaching call or a group call and delivering like a half-assed session because there's not as many people in it as what I wanted to, then why would the better thing happen? You know, we're always doing kind of one of two things. We're either showing the universe that we're ready for what's next, or we're showing the universe that we're not, and that's it. And so when you can be in that embodiment, you stop looking for it, you stop forcing it, you know, you allow yourself to experience what you said you wanted to experience already. And more importantly, these things that you desire will work their way to you, which can sound a little bit weird if you have never heard much of this stuff before, but it's extremely powerful. And I think every single person that's listening to the show is already doing all of these things. They just don't have the awareness of it. And so like you've experienced, once you can gain some real clarity on like where you should put your time, your energy and your focus, you know, how you are consistently creating your own outcomes, you know, you get to the point where it's exciting because you're like, shit, why would I not lean into this stuff when I know how powerful it is? And just to tie that little answer up, this little analogy that I was talking about, that'd be like, imagine someone, you go down to MSAC, right? And you're watching this game of basketball and your friend asks you to come down and that friend just is no good. Yeah. Right? As in like not showing any fucking great qualities as a basketballer whatsoever. Yeah. But then afterwards they're saying to you, know, I can't wait to play in the NBA. Like, fuck do you mean? Play in the NBA? Yeah. I did 3 at MSAC on a Monday night. So for that person to go, well, I'm not going to start showing, you know, all of my best qualities. I'm not going to start playing well until I'm in the NBA. You're not making the NBA if that's the case, right? And so what I'm trying to say there is that people have to stop waiting, need urgency. You know, and that doesn't mean rushing or forcing and controlling, but it's just, I don't understand what people are waiting for. Once you know what it is that you want, start taking action in the direction of that outcome. And again, I'm not just saying this because I'm on your podcast, but you have done a great job of it, because everything that we have talked about, you've put action to. And one of the main things I said to you right from the beginning is that we don't have to know whether those actions are the perfect ones or whether it's all going to work out or, you know, what that's going to lead to. Like, just detach from having to force and control things and just show up as the version of yourself that would already have it and consistently take action. You know, consistency is so underrated. And most of the time it's the shit that people don't want to do, you know, because people want stuff now. But I can guarantee you that if you are willing to commit to whatever it is, whether it is, you know, you inevitably playing AFLW next year, right? We're planting the seed. Whatever these things are, make the convicted decision and show up for yourself. You know, give yourself that best opportunity. And with or without the outcome that you said you want, you've already become the person you wanted to be. You know, that's most important, because as cheesy and cliche as it sounds, like the journey is, when I say the journey is the win, like the experience, that doesn't mean that I'm saying, oh, just enjoy the journey and, you know, don't worry about if you see any success ever. But the better you get at your process and the more present you can be throughout your journey, the higher the likelihood is that you're going to end up where you want to be anyway. Yeah. You know, and as I said, you at least become the person you want to be. Yes. You know, and I think that's so important, because energy is very powerful. You begin attracting the right people. You know, even within my business, the fact that I'm now attracting clients like yourself or business owners and CEOs, like, I'm attracting them because I'm starting to operate from that frequency, and I'm starting to normalize some of these things that once weren't normal, to the point where it makes sense that these type of people are filtering in. So again, I feel like I've rambled so much in this answer here, but hopefully that answers the question.
There's heaps of good stuff there. And I think for me personally, my biggest takeaway from what you've taught me is that the action is the win. Yes. And once you start making action, you get momentum. And it's like, you know, you do the things that you think you'd be scared to do. You do it once and you're like, that actually wasn't that bad. And you keep doing it. And there's no fear attached then. You just do the action. And then it doesn't really matter about the outcome. It's like you actually enjoy the action to get there. You get that momentum and the taste for that. It's a snowballing effect.
Yeah, exactly right. And to your point, it is speed of implementation. Take action. You know, just start. You got to create your own luck, right? And it's not even luck, but it's like the more actions you're taking, the higher the likelihood is that you'll end up where you need to be. But at the same time, the how presents itself as time goes on. You know, when we say just take action, a lot of people don't take action because they can't figure it out. As in like, well, how is this going to be guaranteed to work? Or what are all the steps I need to do in order for me to get to this point here? And it just doesn't always work that way, you know? And so again, I think just deciding who it is that you want to be is super important. You know, and aligning your self-image with that. Like, as cheesy as it sounds, like you should be your own number one fan all the time. You know, why wouldn't you be? And it's not even arrogance or cockiness. It's like, if you don't have belief about what you're saying you want, then game over, man. It's not going to happen at all.
Yeah.
I think a key thing with that is people waiting for evidence.
Yes.
You know, and we talk about this a lot. People are waiting for evidence to give them essentially like the green light to go after what they want. It's almost like I need to know that this is going to work before I try, right? And people will say it's fear of failure. In my opinion, fear of failure is just fear of judgment and fear of people's opinions. No one's fucking scared of failing. And I say this all the time. If you have not taken action on what it is you want from a fear of failure, what's going to allow you to take that action is realizing that you're in the exact same position as what you would be if you failed already. You live in the worst case scenario already. So only good can come from it.
Another one that you are really big on is saying that belief is trust without evidence. And just like people, you know, believe in their God, they believe that they're there without necessarily having met them, seen them, experienced any connection with them. So we can also dedicate our lives to self-limiting beliefs where we, you know, never reach our full potential for fear of failure or realistically fear of judgment. Or we can actually dedicate our lives to self-empowering beliefs. We not only achieve what we desire, but we achieve far more than we could have ever imagined. So I think that really ties in well to what you're saying there. Because if you believe that you can't, you won't. But if you believe that you can, you will. And you always have a nice little saying about that, a quote that I can't remember right now.
Yeah, neither can I now. But you're on the money there, right? Like this is probably one of the most basic yet powerful frameworks around personal development and just life in general. Shift all of your energy and focus towards where you're going, not towards what you don't want or what you don't like or things that you don't want to happen. It makes no sense, right? Manifesting, let's just quickly run over this. Manifesting, or the law of attraction, is having a very clear intention paired with an elevated emotion, consistently keeping your focus and awareness on it, taking action in the direction of it happening, and just having this trust and belief that it's going to happen as if it already has happened, right? People really struggle because there's no evidence. You know, and I always talk about the fact that, you know, police don't show up at someone's house to get evidence for a crime that's going to happen the following week. It doesn't work that way. You create the evidence. And so anyone that's watching or listening now will be able to relate to this, you know, 100%. I want everyone to think of just one time. It doesn't matter when it was. Just think of any time where you've been overthinking, stressed, worried, and making an assumption about some negative thing that you do not want to happen. You've got a clear desire, even though it's the exact opposite of the desire, but you know exactly what you're thinking about. And this is psychologically living in a future that hasn't happened yet. May not happen, probably won't. So you got the clear desire. It's paired with an emotion, which is a negative emotion, probably stress, anxiety, worry, guilt, shame, whatever. And you are consistently overthinking. And for some unknown reason, there's nothing to suggest that that thing's going to happen, but you trust that it will. And then it eventuates, and then people are like, see, told you it's going to happen. Well, my friend, you have just manifested perfectly. Just the exact opposite way around. And so my point in that little story is that there was no evidence that the negative thing was going to happen, but you had no issue believing it, right? And just ask yourself the question, what is the worst thing that can happen if I just genuinely believe that this is possible? Because without that belief, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, we've talked a lot about, you know, what you're doing with this show and what you're going to do with this show, and it's going to be extremely powerful. But I think more and more of this personal growth work or just understanding these frameworks is essential for, you know, to get your life where you want it to be. Even when we talk about, you know, female sport, female athletes, like majority of people are adopting beliefs from others, right? And what we have to understand is those beliefs are being adopted. They're not even yours. But you just take them on board because that's just kind of like what everyone else thinks. And as we've talked about, like whatever your belief is, regardless of whether it's true or false, you will be shown evidence to suggest it's true. And so your experience will always be 100% true of whatever that limiting belief is. And so I would challenge like people, now again, whether this is, you know, women in sport or whether this is just something completely different, no matter how many of these limiting beliefs seem real or how many of them have evidence that they are a thing, detach from them. The focus is not on how can we change the thing we don't like? How can we, you know, make sure the thing that we don't want to happen doesn't happen? That is all very low frequency negative things. You know, ultimately, again, we're just going to use the example of, you know, female sport. We know where we want it to be. You know, people know where they want the level of professionalism or the reward for the athletes in terms of how much they're getting paid, the opportunity, all of these things that, anyone with a half decent brain understands should be the case. And ideally we're working towards it. That's the focus. Even if there are other things that we don't like, the more of your time and energy you put on that thing, the more likely it is you're just going to keep attracting more of it. There's a framework that I think will help. And I know you and I have gone through this. We are always attracting, or we're always being presented in life, evidence to suggest in one of two directions. Let's use an example of body composition. Okay, so if someone has experienced a period of time where they've been unhappy with their body composition, and I'm not saying that body composition is the most important thing in the world, right? But it's a goal for a lot of people. If they've been overweight for a period of time, every time they try and lose the weight and get in great shape, every part of their thoughts, their language, their energy is consumed by the thing that they don't want. Right? In this case, it might be body fat. And so it's like, okay, I'll get on a consult call with a client, and the whole conversation is obviously about them losing body fat, but not once have they kind of talked in a positive way of like how great it's going to be once they're where they want to be. Right? So when we are putting all of our energy towards the thing we don't want, the universe doesn't care that you're saying that you don't want it. It just knows that that's where your focus is, and you will continue to attract more of it. So when I say we're doing one of two things, we're either building the strength of the positive emotion of where we're going, or we're building the strength of the negative emotion of where we don't want to be. And this is why people end up in these self-sabotage cycles, right? If I use this body composition example where, let's say we've got two people. Person one has 20 kilos of body fat to lose. They're both following the same program, right? They might be doing 3 days a week each, and they've been given their nutritional requirements. Person one, who is leaning into what they don't want, is from day one thinking about how many days are left. When's this going to be over? When they go to the gym, they're walking into the gym because they want to lose fat or because they're unhappy with how they look. When they walk out of the gym, they're now thinking about when the next session is or how many more they've got to do until they get to where they want to be. Same with nutrition, same with all this stuff. The second person takes exactly the same actions, does everything to a T, exactly the same. The difference is that person is so clear on their new self-image that from day one, before they've lost any weight, they're already starting to show up as that fit, healthy, lean version of themselves. They're walking into the gym thinking like, oh, I'm going to feel so good by the time I walk out. When they walk out, they're thinking, I just one, respected myself enough to come and, challenge myself to grow and change. Two, it's like I'm one day closer to where I want to be. How good is this? Both people following the exact same plan, but person number two is going to see significantly better results and maintain them because they are turning it into part of who they are, not just following something for a period of time. And so this applies to all areas of life though. You just got to ask yourself the question, am I taking action at the moment on whatever it is? Am I taking action from a place of fear, scarcity and lack? Or am I taking action from a place of abundance, growth, opportunity, possibility? Because again, the actions more often than not are the same, but it's just the feeling behind it. And if you think about it on its most basic form, law of attraction, like attracts like. Why would you expect to attract this positive, high frequency, incredible life when you're operating from a low frequency? Makes no sense.
No.
It's like getting into a car wanting to listen to Fox FM, but having the radio tuned into a different frequency. Doesn't matter how bad you want to listen to it. You can fucking tell everyone. Write it down. You could go and do all this coaching. You could do this, do that, listen to audiobooks. But if your frequency's tuned into the wrong channel, you won't hear it. But when you tune it into the right channel, you'll hear it straight away. And you didn't have to make the car. You didn't have to build the radio. You didn't have to build a radio station. You didn't have to do fucking anything. You just had to tune into the right frequency. And you experience it straight away.
Yeah. I was just thinking when you're saying that, again, bringing this back to sort of, females in sport. I myself, so I play forward in footy.
Yep.
And I remember missing a goal literally right in front of the sticks.
Yep.
And I took that emotion from missing it into every single goal kick that I took from there on. It was like almost traumatic. My eye would be twitching every time I'd get a goal. Like you could give me a goal 50 metres out on the boundary and I'd feel so much more confident kicking that than right in front of the goal.
Yep.
But the problem was I took that negative emotion with me into the next kick thinking, shit, I'm going to miss this. There's no way I'm going to get it. And just like you said, inevitably I'd manifest exactly what I said was going to happen.
Yep.
And I was kicking out of fear instead of saying, right, I've got this, there's no way I can miss this, and kicking out of the opportunity to get the goal. Because what's the worst thing that could happen? I miss it, and so what? It doesn't mean my team we're not losing points for missing goals. So it's just interesting the negative emotion that we take into the next play. And that's what I've been telling my players in the forward line that I'm coaching is that reset and forget. Don't take that negative emotion into the next play because ultimately it will manifest into exactly what you're doing. But if you manifest it correctly, you're more likely to. get the goal.
Exactly. Yeah, look, I was saying to one of the guys I'm coaching at the moment that's in the AFL, I said to him, like, do you reckon there's a high likelihood that you might make a mistake, right? Like, you think about it, the game's however long, high percentage of your max heart rate most of the game, you're fatigued, you've got opponents, you've got this, that, the other. There's such a high likelihood that you're going to make a mistake. Like, it shouldn't be a surprise. Not great, and that's not what we want, obviously. But when someone makes a mistake, now all of a sudden, like we said earlier, they're making it mean something about themselves. And they're buying into that idea too much instead of just allowing it to go, right? Imagine instead if I'd have said to you, like, hey, Kylie, in this game, you're going to kick 10 goals. But you're going to miss 4 of them. And 3 out of that 4 are going to be like really simple set shots. But you're going to miss them. But you're going to kick 10 goals. You would start that game, and if you missed the first couple, you wouldn't really give a shit because you knew that there's 10 goals that are coming. Now, again, we can't guarantee that, but that's what the mentality should be. It should be anticipation. And it's essentially letting go of anything that has happened up until this point because it has no relevance. But a lot of people, unfortunately, are using the past as an example or evidence as to what's going to happen next, right? And so if you're lining up for a set shot, essentially what you got to do is just detach completely, and the last one doesn't matter, right? Like, think about how many hours you've put in to become a good footballer, how many set shots you've taken before. That is what you want to lean into more so than just the one random shot that you missed before. If you look at someone like Steph Curry in the NBA, there's one game that stands out to me massively because I was at it. I was in LA, and it was the first time I went to go watch Steph play. They were playing against the Clippers, and at that stage, he'd kind of just really built momentum as like everyone going, holy shit, this guy's an unbelievable shooter. And at halftime, he had 3 fouls and 2 points. I'm sitting there going, you're fucking kidding me. Fucking one game I come to and he plays like shit.
Out, yeah.
I'm like, what? He finished the game with 44 points. 44 points by the end of the game. So he scored 42 points in a half. That doesn't happen if he's thinking about how bad that first half was. So for someone like that, and a big part of as to why he's been so successful as a shooter, aside from the obvious of actually being able to shoot, but he's not thinking about the last shot. Like, he could miss 9 in a row, and the 10th one is going in. In his head, there's not one. He hasn't wavered whatsoever from the confidence of like what he's capable of. It means nothing. You just got to let go of it and move on. And we talk about it in our calls with personal development. You're not going to become the perfect person, but the difference is how quickly can you recognize patterns and shift and let them go and keep moving forward. Again, whether it's male or female, coming into a game, you should be as relaxed as possible, which sounds, obviously it's a high intensity game and you want to be warmed up and all that shit, of course, but mentally you should be as relaxed as possible because that's the only way you're going to get into a flow state. It's the only way you're going to be operating from abundance, right? But I'll use myself as an example. When I was younger, like, have a great week at training, and then it'd get to a game, and then I just would not produce the same outcome as what I would at training, right? And it was just because I was in my head. I was overthinking everything. I didn't want to make a mistake. I was thinking about, this, that, the other of like things that I did not want to happen. And that's exactly where my focus went. Now, I said to an athlete the other day, imagine if let's just say it's a basketballer. Imagine if you go down to MSAC and join a game of 5-on-5 with a bunch of people you've never met before. How are you going to play? And they're like, oh, great, probably dominate, it'd be fun. I'm like, yeah. So that's the same mentality you should be bringing into an NBL or an NBA court. Because, like, why not? You want to be playing relaxed and free. And there's nothing you're going to do an hour or two before the game that's going to make you a better footballer. That part's already done. Your job now is to come out and just be so present in what you're doing. And, with personal growth stuff, whether you're using tools like meditation and journaling and breath work and stuff, just to mentally rehearse what you need to normalize. Like for you to walk off a ground next year when you're playing AFLW, having kicked a bag of 5 goals, when that happens, it shouldn't be a surprise for you. When you're doing the work, it's almost like, yeah, I expected this. You're still going to be happy and grateful and excited, but it's not like, oh my God, how the hell has this happened? It's like, you should expect to do that. Why wouldn't you? Why would you not expect for that to happen? And so when that becomes almost like the baseline of like your expectancy in life, and I think the important part with that though, is that it's inevitable that yes, there are going to be these waves of like up and down, contraction phase, expansion phase, all the rest of it. Can you show up exactly the same when you're in a contraction phase? Can you show up exactly the same regardless of whether you get that or not? And I think that's where it becomes really important because everyone, use gym as an example. Everyone can go to the gym when they're on holidays and it's fucking 30 degrees and you've had a great sleep every night and, you got all the time in the world. Everyone can go to the gym and put in the work. But are you willing to do that on a week where you've got chaos with work? You might not have slept as well. It's harder to make the effort to go and do that. Will you still show up for yourself then? That's what really gives you the growth of showing up when it's easier not to. you know, or losing the trust and the belief when things don't go the way you thought they were going to go. But it's crazy to think that you know how everything should go. And so when you're not reacting, like we said, when you're responding, everything shifts very quickly, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I was going to put this question back on you quickly, especially for the audience, right? And it's probably hard to an extent because obviously while we've been working together, you've been in rehab recovery for your knee. What do you feel like has been the thing that shifted most, whether it's a belief or just like a mental framework around football in particular? What do you think shifted the most since we started, and why?
I would say the biggest thing that shifted for me is detaching from the outcome. So again, before I started working with you, I was so obsessed with getting to the next level of football because that's where I saw my self-worth attached. But once I started working with you, I have now completely detached from the outcome. And to be honest, I don't care if I do make it or don't make it, but it's giving me the intention every day to get up, to go to the gym, because give me something to work towards. But I've also now found that there is such opportunity in loss. And that was with the ACL. Since then, I've shifted into sports media, which has been my goal for a long time. And I've started this podcast, and it's just given me the time and space to dedicate myself to other areas of life, which is even furthering my detachment from footy. Now, don't get me wrong, I can't wait to come back next year. And I think, I've branched out into coaching. So my footy IQ has increased. My leadership in the space has increased. And I think I'm going to be in such a better position once I do start playing footy next year and hopefully can build my way up. But again, I'm not going to be playing to be, the best and playing AFLW. I'm going to be playing for the reasons that I want to be doing that in the first place, which is the enjoyment of it. And again, completely, I don't want to see myself as just a footballer. I want to be Kylie. And Kylie is multifaceted. She does the podcast, she plays footy, she loves hanging out with her friends. And that's how I want to start showing up, because I think I really spiraled negatively once I did my ACL and thought that my whole identity is now in crisis. And now I've come to realize that there's so much more to me than footy. And I think that's something that athletes don't get told enough.
I agree. And I also think that's going to be a big part of the reason as to why you do make it. That's the interesting bit, and I know we said it earlier in the chat, but it is this almost this contrast of deep desire and excitement for what it is that you want. You should feel that way, right? You should be excited about it, but at the same time, kind of like zero fucks about whether it happens or not, which sounds so weird. Yeah. But anyone can think of an example where like they've worked towards or wanted something for such a long period of time, and then when it finally happens, it's then so easy to reproduce because now you actually don't want it or you don't need it. You've detached from it completely. And the reason why I asked that question as well is because, again, you're kind of like going all in with like a bunch of these different areas. And I suppose, we've been talking about some of the mastermind stuff, and we had the first female one the other week. And I think it'd be cool too, like, as I've said to you, I want to get you to one of these future masterminds. But it'd be really cool once off the back of that, I think, for you to even be able to share that with your audience too, because we did our first one a couple of weeks ago, the female one. And I was telling you in our call last week, it was super interesting just to hear almost every person in that room had the same limiting beliefs, whether they've still got them or whether they've reframed them. And I think as an athlete or a business owner, you can feel quite lonely sometimes, which is a weird thing to say when you're in a team sport. Yeah. But ultimately, it can be pretty lonely. It can be a lonely journey, but you get to decide. I think beliefs are decisions. Once you're aware of them, they're a decision, right? And so, like I've said to you, the only thing that's stopping you doing what you want to do is yourself. And that's it. Yeah. And when you can lean into that belief in yourself and the convicted decisions that you've kind of done this year, things will happen. They will fall into place. And it's not because we're forcing them to happen. It's because we're putting ourselves in a position for them to happen. We're trying to normalize it, And I think the accumulation of everything you're doing, whether it be, these podcasts, whether it be your journey as an athlete, all of these things, all ties in together so perfectly to the point where, as you said, that's just one variable of you and your life. And you're very good at it, but that's just one part of your life. It's not everything, I think, again, it's just so important, not for anyone else, but for yourself, to have so much value and belief and love for yourself, which does sound cheesy, I get it, but it's essential. And when you have that can be felt. Yes. Everyone's been in a room when someone walks in, they haven't even said anything, you don't know who they are, and you can just feel like they're important, or you can feel like they've got good energy, or there's a good person. Very much the same as when a couple walks into a room and everyone knows they've just had an argument, but they haven't said anything. Yeah. So what you have control over is your energetic state and is how you show up each day. And when, you get clear on what it is that you want and you're consistently showing up and you're consistently aware of where you can improve as well, that's when growth starts to happen. And as I've said to you, like even this year so far, it's been so cool to watch like how much is kind of the momentum you're building. you know, because that's what it is, just momentum. And it's not from doing anything drastic. You know, you'll be able to attest to this. It's not like I've come in and gone, hey, fuck, no one knows about this thing. Let's do this crazy shit that you probably never heard about before. It's just consistently showing up. As you said, having that North Star, removing the things that just aren't in alignment anymore. And one of, if not the most important thing, is the self-image. You know, how do you view yourself? Because ultimately that's what others are going to view you as well. And it doesn't matter what other people think of you, but if you don't even think that positive or highly of yourself, why would anyone else?
Very true. Very true. Now, because you are the first male guest on the podcast, I usually finish the podcast with some questions, but I'm really keen to pick your brain on how do you think men can play a role in growing women's sports?
I think first and foremost is just awareness. And when I say awareness, I mean awareness on more of a deeper level or more detailed level. Example, I know it's not in sport, but the group call we had last week and Laura jumped on. You know, one of the questions I asked her was like, what do you kind of wish or hope that more men knew about, you know, your experience? And I think that's one of the important aspects is just clarity. You know, clarity over like where we can help or benefit or you know, do things that are going to be of value or to progress it faster. And it's also just the belief thing, I think, right? Like we talked about this the other week, like so many people have these set beliefs. Now, let's say it's around female sport, right? The reason they have that belief, and this is not giving anyone an excuse, like I want to reiterate that. But the reason they have that belief is because of whatever they've been surrounded by, whatever beliefs they've adopted from someone else. And so I think in terms of how we can help progress it, one, just more awareness, right? And that includes things like giving people a really big platform. It's not even giving them a platform. It's like giving them the opportunity to share like how much value they've already got. Things like this, like the fact that you're running this podcast, I think is going to be so valuable, like significantly across the board, not just for athletes, but I know you're going to be chatting with some really cool people that aren't players as well, just to hear about it. But to come back to answer your question, do you think this is my first ever buddy podcast today? But I think, ask more questions to see where we're able to support and help. But at the same time, like you and I had a conversation about the other week, is don't treat it essentially any differently. And I hope that comes across the right way, because what I mean by that is, to me, it doesn't matter whether, you know, male or female. You know, let's say whether it's in sport or whether it's in professional life, it's like you are going to get your opportunities based off merit, not based off, we're not going to tick this box here, tick this box there. I think that's where there's a bit of this slippery slope, I think, because now you've got people just, you know, doing these things just to tick a box. And it just defeats the whole purpose of like why people are trying to make change in the first place. And so if more men can listen and get a better understanding of how we are able to support or do the things, or at least acknowledge and be able to put more awareness to the parts that need to improve, and at the same time continue to, sounds bad, but continue to like really build a level of respect, you know, for what it is. And I think part of that, as you and I discussed as well, it's like having more conversations like you're going to have on this show, to the point where it's not coming from a place of we want to build female or women in sport and kind of like fuck the men. That's where I feel like the biggest resistance is, because it can come across that, not intentionally, but if that's the way it's coming across, then you, like we talk about, it just creates more resistance.
Yes.
Right? Whereas if it's more so like, this has nothing to do with men, in a sense, right? I think that's probably the most powerful thing, as in like, you're not doing it because of men.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Am I making sense?
You are.
Because I can't remember how I articulated it to you the other day, but I think I said something to you along the lines of like, I think it's so important with this show for it to have both sides. And when I say both sides, I mean more so like, hey, the reason why we're doing this has nothing to do with like proving a point to men or anything like that.
No.
You know, it's
right.
more so like, hey, we're working our ass off, and the more opportunity we have, the better. You know, and I think one of the points we both made was, for that to continue to improve, I think that has to start way earlier.
Yes.
You know, way from a much younger age, to the point where the parents are kind of bought into the idea as well. The parents are following the same path, or putting in the same level of effort and intent into like the development of, say, a junior athlete as a female early on, the same amount that they would be putting into potentially their son that wants to play AFL one day. Because I think the earlier we can kind of have that foundation and structure, obviously the more it flourishes later down the track. But what's your opinion? Because I apologize for taking so long to answer that question, but like, what do you think at the moment is like either the number one thing or a handful of things that would really accelerate the growth and the I guess you could just say the equality of it too?
Yeah, well, I think what you're saying is true. It's not men versus women. It's we're both in this journey together, and we can both help each other to give each other the platform that sport deserves. Because at the end of the day, it's sport. It's not women's sport, men's sports. We shouldn't even have to say women in sport. It's just sport, and women are athletes. And I think we sometimes forget that men can be our biggest supporters and women can actually be our harshest critics. So that's what I really want to reiterate with 4TG, is that this is a community for people who believe and want to promote in women's sport. It doesn't matter what gender you are, what sexuality, what age, anything. Yeah. So long as you believe in women's sport, this is for everyone. But I think, one of the biggest things that men can do is, and this is something that a guest mentioned a while ago, is that just treat us like we are, any other athlete.
Of course.
And if you do hear your friends or something saying, oh, he's playing like a girl, just call it out, because it's the drive-bys which allows this environment, which is what you're saying with your, taking it back to when you were kids. If your dad was always there saying, oh, he's playing like a bloody girl, well, you just got to think he's probably got a daughter that he loves and is proud of, and he's degrading her. And inevitably, you're going to have a daughter, a sister, a cousin who is a female who's going to play sport. So you have to think ahead and kind of call that stuff out, just so we get the equal respect.
Yeah, for sure. I've been very fortunate to work with, a number of female athletes, professional and kind of amateur. And like having had a background of working with a lot of male athletes as well, particularly like male athletes who are at the peak of their sport, there's no fucking difference. Yeah. And I think that's the thing. I guess to summarize what we were just what I was trying to say, you spoke very well, is it's not a us versus them.
Yeah.
It can't be. I think as long as the messaging is us versus them, which I'm not saying it is, but for some people's messaging it is.
Yeah.
As long as it's us versus them, there's just going to be resistance from the other side.
Yes.
And instead, if it's more so like, hey, instead of us telling you how it should be or like where you're doing wrong, I think there's elements of that are true, but more so it's like, hey, watch what we do.
Yeah. And
more
let's
so
all work
than
together.
Yeah, exactly. Watch what we do, and exactly right. Work together and elevate, everyone.
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah.
And as I said to you, I think this podcast and content like this is the best way to do it. It's the best way to do it, to just expose people to what we want to normalize.
Yeah. Yeah.
From a place, as we spoke about before, not from a place of negativity. It's not like, hey, this needs to change because we do not like this. That may 100% be true that, there's a certain thing that needs to change because it's not great, but all the energy and focus just should be on where you're going, because inevitably you're going to get away from that shit anyway. And I think the more of those actions that can be taken, it becomes undeniable. Like I've said to you, like whether it's in sport, in a corporate world, whatever, it's like make it an undeniable thing. As in, like, as long as you're doing your part to the point where you can't be ignored, or it can't be, like people can't have a differing opinion based off the fact that you've just put in the effort, put in the work, and consistently shown up. And again, big congratulations to you for starting the show. You don't have to do this. But you don't have to do this. Yeah. And I think ultimately, like, you have the opportunity to have so much impact. Not just on the people who listen to the show, but even for yourself and who you get exposed to, and for others to be exposed to you too. This is what I'm talking about. Like, we have to have that really strong self-image belief of like, we're all on this equal playing field. No one is on a pedestal. We are all equal, male, female, doesn't matter. And when you can approach it from that way, I think, life's a lot more enjoyable. And most importantly, like, that impact and change becomes a lot less resistant. We can remove the resistance, like anything else, it'll flow much better.
Absolutely. And just for the listeners, if they do want to work with you or be exposed to some of your content, where can they find you?
I guess the two best places, probably the Fitness and Lifestyle podcast and maybe Instagram at DJK Fitness. I put out a lot of content quite consistently, and if there's someone listening that feels like they're going through some resistance or limiting beliefs, or just quite literally want to start maximizing the opportunity they already have, those places are probably the best place to find me. Just reach out and I'd be more than happy to have a chat.
Yeah, well, I can personally highly recommend, because as I said, my life has leveled up in all areas, not just the way I approach sport. So look, thank you really very much for being the first male guest on the podcast. It's been brilliant. And for the listeners out there, if you've taken value in this podcast, please like it, rate it, share it, and tag us at 4TG. And I'm really excited to see where it all goes, and hopefully a lot of people can take some of these tools on board and it will help them in their sporting career and elsewhere.
I agree. And as I said before, you should be super proud of yourself. And you've continued to take these actions like very quickly, like we spoke about, speed of implementation, start building momentum, create your own opportunity. And I'm excited to keep watching your growth over the next couple of years and excited to come to your first AFLW game next year.
Yeah, we can hope so. Very good. All right.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Denny. We'll chat to you later.